and tell me, what did we talk about in the first two verses of chapter 3 after these prayers to the spiritual master? Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Okay, so out with your notepads and pens, and let's see, what did we talk about in the first two verses of chapter 3 of Bhagavad Gita? First three verses, and looking at the chat here to see anything popped up. You can open up your books and recap. That's fine. It's okay to do that. And while you're waiting, yeah, take your time to recap. It's important to not lose the connection between the verses in the chapter. So, okay, so we have one answer there from Sadhana Mataji. And another one from Sukheva Mataji. Yeah, both of them are almost the same, which is good. So we have no clashes over there in the conception. Anybody else remember? Anybody else remembers? Yes or yes? Vaishana Mataji says, Vaishana Mataji, you mix the Sunday and the you mixed something from the Sunday class there. All right. Yeah. So basically, Arjun is asking that why are you asking me to engage in this ghastly warfare if you say buddhi is better than karma? Why are you asking me to do some karma and some work? And basically he says, you tell me, and you are giving me equivocal instructions, and you have to tell me what is good for me. Right? So that is what he said. And what is beneficial for me? Yes, that's a very important part of what he asked for. Right? So today we will continue on, and he has asked a question, and of course, Sri Bhagwan is going to respond to that. And let's see, what does God say as part of the response to it? Okay. So we're going to go and start sharing the screen now here. And please confirm that you're able to see my screen, which should show you that my desktop number 2 with verse number 3.3 on it. And can you, yes or no? Can you see it? All right, I saw a thumbs up there. Okay, so we'll take it as a yes. And so, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, Lokesmin dvividha nishtha, pura prokta maya naga, jnana yogena sankhyanam, karma yogena yoginam. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, Lokesmin dvividha nishtha, pura prokta maya naga, jnana yogena sankhyanam, karma yogena yoginam. So, what is he saying? Let's look at the synonyms to understand what is the Lord saying. So here he's saying, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. So by now we know very well what is the meaning of Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. That is, Shri Bhagavan said. And again, we have to remember how Vedavyas is writing these things, and we have to remember that he did not say Shri Krishna Uvacha or Arjuna Uvacha or Krishna Uvacha. He's clearly saying Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. So we have to remember that what we are listening, the words that we are listening from is coming from somebody who has got the six major opulences. He's the most intelligent, he's the wisest, he's the most powerful, he's the most beautiful, he's the most wealthy, the most knowledgeable, and then most renounced, even after having all these opulences. So these words are coming from such a heavy person, so they must carry weight. So Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, Supreme Personality of Godhead said. And what did the Supreme Personality of Godhead say? So he says, Loke. So in the world, right? So here, Asmin, this, right? So in this world, he's saying, Dvi Vidha. The Dvi means two, right? Vidha is kind. So there are two kinds. And what is it? There are two kinds of faith. So he's talking about Shraddha, Nishtha. Two kinds of faith are there, or determination. And Pura is formerly, Prokta means said, right? Maya, by me. So Pura, Prokta, formerly I have said. So formerly, before, earlier, I have told you that there are two kinds of faith. Anagha, O sinless one, Jnana Yogena, by the linking process of knowledge. Sankhyanam, of the empiric philosophers. Karma Yogena, by the linking process of devotion. Yoginam, of the devotees. So here Prabhupada is translating the word Nishtha as what? Can you take out your pads and tell me? Faith, faith, faith. Very good. Yep, so you're on top of that. And let's look at the translation. In the translation, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O sinless Arjuna. So where is the word sinless there? What does sinless mean in Sanskrit? What do you call sinless in Sanskrit? O sinless Arjuna is saying. Anagha, anagha, right? Anagha. And so, O sinless Arjuna, I've already explained that there are two classes of men who try to realize the self. Self. Some are inclined to understand it by empirical philosophical speculations, and others by devotional service. So there are two kinds of people, and they will have their inclinations in two different directions. And because of their inclination or because of their faith, they will be pursuing two different paths to realize the self. And what those two paths are, one is jnana, which is empirical philosophical speculation, and others by devotional service. That's the two paths, right? Philosophical speculation or devotional service. So Prabhupada says, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, in the purport, that in the second chapter, verse number 39, and what we will do is, like, we will quickly go there and have a little peek at verse number 39. And why I'm saying that we should do that is because verse number 39 in chapter 2 was a very interesting verse, in the sense that it was kind of like a dividing line between Buddhi Yoga and Sankhya Yoga that Krishna was talking about. So 239, and let me bring that up, 239, and see what does 239 tell us here. Okay. So I'm trying to write it one flag or like. So Eshate Bihita Sankhye Buddhi Yoge Tvemam Shrunu Buddhya Yukto Yaya Partha Karma Bandham Prahasyasi. So after he has explained everything about the soul, right? That, najayate mriyate va kadachin nayam, yeah, all that stuff, yeah, right? Na hanyate hanyamane sharire, or, then you cannot nashoshati maruta, cannot be dried. After telling him everything about the soul, the size of the soul, etc., comes in the purport. So there's a lot of analysis that's going on about between the spirit and the matter. And so he's saying that I have described this knowledge to you through analytical studies. I've done that, right? And now listen. So this is the part where the bifurcation happens in second chapter. Now listen as I explain it in terms of working without fruitive results. Okay. O son of Pritha, when you act in such knowledge, you can free yourself from the bondage of work. So here also in this verse, Krishna is talking about work. So he's not saying that you don't do any work. So that is why Krishna is saying that I told you before, right? I told you before. And right after this, verse number 39 is the very important verse and very famous verse where Krishna is talking about Buddhi Yoga. And the extreme and the pinnacle of Buddhi Yoga is when you utilize your Buddhi in the service of the Lord. And you utilize your Buddhi for prayers of the Lord. Parshana Mataji, you have raised your hand. Is there something you want to say? Can you type it out? I can't hear you.
Mataji, Vidyavadhu Mataji is asking, your class is not on the Facebook.
It's on the Facebook. It is on.
She can't find it.
Okay, well, I can't help much here. Okay, no problem. She'll find it. Yeah, tell her it's on. So then after that is the very famous verse 2.40, which is Neha bhikrama nashosti pratyavayo na vidyate swalpam apiyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. And this was glorifying the act of devotional service. And it says that if you're following the path of devotional service of Buddhi Yoga at the pinnacle, it says in this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. And we have talked many times, what is the most dangerous type of fear? What is the most dangerous type of fear that we should have? 2.40, very famous verse. Neha bhikrama swalpam, even if you do just a little bit of endeavor on this path, then all good things, it never gets. Yeah, all right. So yes, and Archana is right. It says that the biggest fear should be, or biggest anxiety should be that in my next birth, am I going to get a human body or not? Because you can't pursue devotional service in the body of an animal. Okay. So, so Krishna is telling him that I have told you about this before, right? So where he's saying that, if you go back to our verse, he's saying Pura. Pura means old, right? Puran is Puran. Okay, Sadhana Mataji, go ahead.
It's not allowing me to unmute. Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yeah,
so yeah, I mean, I think it's bewildering for us, right? Because even in the last 5 or 6 minutes, we've talked about Buddhi Yoga, Sankhya Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and then
yes,
knowing me from Buddhi, and then on top of that, we look at what is most fearful, but it's not just that we don't get a human body. Sometimes some people may be thinking, well, that they don't get out of this material realm. That could be the biggest fear. So there's many levels of these questions, right?
yes.
And yeah, so it's not always like, yeah, I mean, I
yes.
So I've tried to keep some sanity in my brain going through, but I always think of 2 or 3 responses to everything, because it depends on what plane or what level you're asking that, right?
Yes, and then also what level of plane that person is on, right? So when a person is doing devotional service, right, his biggest fear is just, whether I'll get a human life or not, because he doesn't care. Like Prahlad didn't even care to go back to Godhead. So he was not thinking about when will I get out of this material world. He didn't want to go. He said, I want to be here to take care of these fools and, rascals. That's what Prabhupada translates. And so he doesn't care. And a devotee, again, doesn't care whether he goes to a hellish planet or not. All that he says is that I want to just do devotional service to you. So ideally, the biggest fear should be the ideal biggest fear should be that I should still be a
Devotional
human being. Yes, I should be a human being, and on top of that, I should be doing devotional service. That's the ideal fear, and the best fear that everybody should have. And then, of course, others people can have other fears. That what if I'm not able to finish my devotional service? You know, Arjun also asked that same question in the 6th chapter, right? What happens to the unsuccessful transcendentalist? What if I'm unsuccessful? And Krishna answers that question over there, right? And I also told once about that story about Narad Muni and the cobbler and the sannyasi, you know, who was constantly chanting and praying, and the cobbler would just chant the name of the Lord or sing the name of the Lord as he was mending the shoes. And both of them meet. Narad Muni meets both of them separately and tells them that he's going to Vaikuntha to meet Vishnu, and says like, what should I do? You want me to convey some message? And so both of them ask that, you know, when will I be liberated? And so he goes and you know, goes to Vishnu and tells him about both these people. And he also says that they had asked me to describe what were you doing. So also tell them, what were you doing and what are you doing and how are things in Vaikuntha? What were you doing when you met him? And so when Narad Muni goes and meets Vishnu, then he tells them that there's that man there. So when he's going to be liberated, he says it's going to take him 10 days. And then for this one, for the cobbler, he says, oh, the cobbler, you know, the one who sits under the tamarind tree and mends the shoes. Oh, that one, he will live for as long as there are leaves, you know, on the tamarind tree. When all the leaves on the tamarind tree fall down, then he's going to be liberated. And you know how tiny the tamarind leaves are, right? The way they are structured. And so, and then he says, okay, now, and then tell me, what should I tell them? What were you doing? So he says, okay, just tell them that Vishnu, he had a needle and he was pushing an elephant through the hole of the needle. So Narada is bewildered and he says, what? So he said, no, you just go and tell them that. So then he comes down, he first goes to the sannyasi who's there, yogi, and so he's very excited. Yogi says, you have come back. And so what was he doing? So he says he was putting an elephant through the eye of a needle. So he says, come on, you know, this is not a time for joking. Okay, if you don't want to tell me, don't tell me. But okay, now give me the answer to my other question. When I'm going to be liberated. So he said it's going to take you 10 lifetimes. And he's so disgusted with that and with himself and with the whole process. Like, you know, I have spent my whole life and I'm not going to go back to Godhead this time. This is useless. I think this whole thing is useless. And he walks away. Then Narad Muni goes to the cobbler, and then cobbler looks at him and says, oh, you're a Vaikuntha return, you know, offers his prostrated obeisances and then seats him. And then he says, okay, how is Vishnu? And, you know, what was he doing? And so he says that he was putting an elephant to the eye of a needle. And he says, yeah, you know, yes, after all, you know, there are so many banyan trees. When he can pack so many banyan trees in a little seed, you know, what is a big deal for him to pass an elephant through the eye of a needle? So he had that faith. And we are talking about faith here also, as Nishtha, which Prabhupada translated that. And so Narad now comes to his, you know, like, oh, wow, I know now why Vishnu asked me to come there. Yeah, so he learned something from the cobbler. And then the cobbler asked that, you know, did he tell when I'm going to be liberated? So he said, yes. He said that, you know, when all the leaves from this tamarind tree are going to fall down, then you're going to be liberated. So he said, that's fine. At least I have a number. I'm so happy that he gave me a number. You know, how many millions of leaves are there? After so many births, I will be liberated. And as soon as he says that, you know, the big Garuda comes flapping his wings, and from the whirlwind that blows when he flaps his wings, all the leaves of the tamarind tree fall down immediately, and he's liberated. So that is the, you know, and when you go reach different levels of devotion, the mood is very different. But the ideal question that Neha Bhikamanasasi Swalpam. So it says that if you do devotional service, then that biggest fear will go away. That fear that I will fall down into the animal kingdom, because he'll just say that even if I fall down into an animal, make me a Gajendra. So that I remember the prayers I offered to you, like that. So that the mood is different of a devotional service. So it's actually putting devotional service at a very, very high, very, very high level there.
Thank you.
So yeah, good. So so then going back to our chapter, which is number 3, and just look at the question that he had asked yesterday that we covered, and let me just bring it up real quickly here. And so he said that Vyamishrena Vakyena. So we understood, equivocals is bit difficult to understand. They can be interpreted in two different ways. And so he says that ekam pada nishchitya yena shreyo maham apnuvan. So he says that, therefore, please tell me decisively which will be the most beneficial for me, right? And if you look at over here, right, where is the word beneficial coming in the translation here? In the word by word. Do you see the word beneficial anywhere? Anything to do with beneficial? What's the Sanskrit word for that? It's a very important word. Yeah, so you got it very right. Yeah, Shreyaha, right? So I wanted to Shreyas, Shreya, and that the word is Shreyas. So we use the words Shreyas and Preyas. These two words are used and they are the opposite. So Shreyas, what Prabhupada is translating Shreyas is that real benefit. And Preyas is not necessarily a real benefit. Shreyas and Preyas are distinguished by, Preyas is when you get some quick return for whatever you're doing, right? So you want something, by hook or crook, you get it, and you'll have a temporary happiness, but then there'll be consequences of doing that. And then Shreyas is when you are going to get some benefit which is real and which will be everlasting, right? And that's why devotional service is something that's going to get you everlasting peace and everlasting happiness. So Shreyas, the real good, comes only from doing devotional service to the Lord. Otherwise, the Vedas are there. The Vedas are full of mechanisms of how you can get prayers, immediate good that you can get immediately, right? And there's a little bit of a hint of Shreyas and prayers in Arjuna's thinking when he was talking in the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where he was saying that, how will we enjoy? So enjoyment of the spoils of the war is prayers, immediate, right? You did something, you won a war and you get it, right? But then he's also talking about the long-term benefits of not fighting, where he was saying that if we kill these elder people, what's going to happen to the elders and who's going to guide, and community projects will be over. So he's talking a little farther there. So there's a little bit of a smell of Shreyas there. But the real Shreyas is when you do devotional service and take to the path that's going to take you back to Godhead. So here he's saying that, tell me which is the one which is going to give me the real benefit. So you can see that after Krishna has talked to him, a lot in chapter number 2. And so now Krishna is asking very intelligent questions, that his intelligence is awakened and he's asking much deeper questions philosophically. And then here also you say, right, but therefore, please tell me decisively which will be the most beneficial for me. So one of the things that Arjuna has brought about is, he says about in the first chapter, in the first verse of this chapter, right? Then he's saying that, why are you engaging me in this ghastly warfare, right? And then he's saying, next time, I'm not understanding all these instructions that you are given. So Krishna has given him so many instructions in the previous chapter, right? And so after so many instructions he has given, that he's asking, okay, fine, you just tell me which is best for me. And sometimes we do that, right? Where a person will sit down and explain a lot of things to you, lot things. And in the end, you just say, now you just tell me, okay, fine, you just tell me what is best. And then if somebody comes and tells us, somebody comes and says something like that to us, then we are in that, usually we are in that mood that we will just go and cut the chase and we'll go straight to the answer and whatever is there, right? But Krishna will not do that. Because remember, Krishna is speaking the Bhagavad Gita not only for Arjuna, but he's speaking the Bhagavad Gita for all of us who might not be at the same level of intelligence as Arjuna is to be able to understand what we are saying, right? So keep this in mind that he has asked this question. He has asked Krishna that, tell me, Krishna, what is best for me, right? And so then Krishna is saying that, hey, look here, buddy, I told you. I told you before, Pura. Right? Pura means old, Puran means history, right? Like that, Puratan, those kind of words are there in Sanskrit. So he's saying, Shri Bhagwanacha, Lokosmin Dui Vidhanishta Pura Prokta Maya Nagha. And then he is pointing to, and he's calling Arjuna as Maya Nagha. And we will see that there are a lot of times that he calls Arjun by that name, He calls him Mayanaga. In 15th chapter, we'll say that, things like that. So he'll keep on saying that. And one of the reasons he's addressing him as Mayanaga is, one is sinless, right? And what has sin got to do with devotional service? How are sin and devotional service related? What's the relationship between sin and devotional service? Looking for the answer. Anybody gave any answers? They are inversely proportional. They don't go together. Thus reg evas dharmas and cleanses, and therefore sinless. No sin in devotional service. Sins get wiped out. I was looking for that answer. Sins get wiped out. That's the real relationship between sins and devotional service. So he's saying that, you are, and once the sins are wiped out, and not only that, not only do your sins get wiped out, the most important thing about devotional service is that it also removes the tendency to sin. Otherwise, you can get rid of sinful reactions by way of doing prayaschit. You do some prayaschit, you do some atonement, and you get your record cleared, right? But Parikshit Maharaj, says that. He says that Kvachin nirvate bhadrat kvachit charati tatpuna prayashchitam atho partam manye kunjara shochavat. So he says that when people do some sinful activities, and then after that they go and do some prayaschit, and then after that punah charati, they again go and do that sinful activity. So he says, what's the good use? What is the use of that? Because if you are engaging in the same sinful activities again, it's like as if it's just same as the bathing of an elephant. What does the elephant do? It goes to the river, takes a nice bath, comes out, takes some dust on the trunk and puts it all over its body. So what's the use of doing something like that, right? So one of the things to remember about is that, but if you're apart from not following the route of atonement, you can always do that, but then bringing in the concept of devotional service is going to root out the proclivity to sin. That's very, very important. The tendency to sin, the inclination to sin. Devotional service is going to remove that, right? And that is what makes devotional service so popular. And there's a very nice verse in Bhagavad Gita, which will come a little later, but I really like that verse. I'm going to bring that here for you, in front of you. And which comes in the 7th chapter, and I think it's towards the end, could be the last or may not be the last, but let me just bring it up here. It is the Tesham Tvantagatam Papam Jananam Punyakarmanam Tvedam Damoha Nirmukta Bhajante Dridhavrita. So it is 28, verse number 28. And it says, Yesham Tvantagatam Papam Jananam Punyakarmanam Tedvandamoha Nirmukta Bhajante Mam Dridhavritaha. So it translates to two persons who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life, and whose sinful actions are completely irradiated, are freed from the dualities of delusion, and they engage themselves in my service with great determination. So this is also very important, that you have to become Mayanaga to be able to get the kind of determination that is required to pursue devotional service to the hilt, to the extreme, to the complete, to the pinnacle. So that's those sinful tendencies have to be raised out. And one might just say that then, I have got such a big backlog of sins, how do I clear it? And that's fine. These things happen in cycles. You do some devotional service, then some sins get eradicated, and then you get a little bit more Shraddha to do that, and then some more will get eradicated. So that's how it goes. It's not a linear way in which the progress is made. right? So keep that in mind, that there's a choice of words that Krishna is using to describe Arjuna. When he says Yamaya Naga, he's actually pointing out and saying that you are full of, you are free of sins, which means you're ready to do some good devotional service. So using it. So Shri Bhagwan Vacha, Leukismin Dvividha Nishta, Pura Prokta Mayanaga. So hey Mayanaga, I have told you that there are two faiths that people have. And then depending on the faith that you have, your actions depend on your faith. Is that right or right? Can you give me an example of how can we say to support the statement that your actions are governed by the faith that you have? Look at and faith. When I'm saying faith, I don't mean faith in devotional service. I don't mean just devotional service, right? A devotional service has got faith, but even in your mundane day-to-day activities, their faith is involved, right? So you can give me an example from any place to say how the actions that you take depend on your faith. Some example, any example. You can also raise your hand and answer if you have a long answer to your question, to this question. Any example of faith governing the actions? Kathy, you'll have to elaborate a little bit more on that. You're almost there, but a little bit more on that. Yeah, so Kathy is saying that when I open the tap, there will be water. So that is faith, that when I open the tap, there will be water. My question is that give me an example of how you can show that actions are governed by faith. So just a little bit more, elaborate that just a little bit more. And I see some hands raised there. Varshana Mataji, if you can give me a quick answer to that. And I'll have to ask you to unmute yourself. Okay. No. Okay, go ahead.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Mataji, when Ajamil, you see, when they came to take him, the Yamdutas and the Vishnu Dutas, and there was discussion, and then he came to know that I was involved in the wrong I went on the wrong path, and then he went to the a pilgrimage, and then he sat down. He had faith that now if I pray to the Lord devotedly, then I will surely go to the Vaikuntha. So he had faith, and that is how he left and went there and meditated on the Lord, prayed to the Lord.
Very good. So his action of leaving his family, where he was living with a prostitute, his action of leaving the family and renouncing everything was based on the faith that by doing this, he will go back to Godhead. Okay, very good. Anything else from the mundane? Like when I open the tap, I will get water. That is the faith. What action would you do that's in support of this faith? What is the action that you do day-to-day life? That you take a glass of water, empty, and you put it under the tap and you open the tap. That's because the faith is there that when I open the tap, water is going to come out and not blood. Right? So that faith is there. Okay. All right. Let's see what Sutapa Mataji has to say.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Mataji, in mundane life, that if we are sick or so we go to the doctor and there is a faith that he or she will cure us or give the exact medication what we'll need for the body or for the symptoms.
Yes.
So like a doctor and other things also, like the electrician, and means particular work we go for the particular person who is like expertise, they have the expertise on that kind, exact on that field, and we hope, we have the faith that they will do the job properly.
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
correctly.
So yeah. So in short, a person has faith that he'll be cured, and that's why he takes the action of going to the doctor, right? So that's one example. Okay, you can lower your hand so that I'm not confused. Okay, Vindhyavali Mataji.
Mataji, when we go for surgery, like doctor, she says, when we go for surgery also, we just, we have the faith the doctor will do after unconscious, I don't know what he's going to do, but I have the faith on the doctor
Right,
that whatever he does, I have to take it.
right.
So
Right.
that if I don't have faith to the doctor, I cannot go for the surgery.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And we had also talked about earlier about two very contradictory actions that a person does just because his faith has changed. And we took the example of the day you buy the boat and the day you sell the boat, right? You're doing two opposite activities just because your faith has changed, right? So faith governs, what a person is going to do. So that's why he's saying now there are two kinds of faith that will impel a person to do some kind of an action. And what is it? He's saying Gyan Yogena Sankhyanam. So some people have that faith, right, in the direction of Gyan Yoga, and some have in the direction of Karma Yoga. So let's go here into the purport to see what Prabhupada has to say. So in the second chapter, verse number 39, the Lord has explained two kinds of procedures, namely Sankhya Yoga and Karma Yoga or Buddhi Yoga. In this verse, the Lord explains the same more clearly. So now he's going a little bit further. Sankhya Yoga or analytical study of the nature of spirit and matter is the subject matter for persons who are inclined to speculate and understand things by experimental knowledge and philosophy. They have to experiment, they have to break it down, they have to examine every piece of matter and then come to the conclusion that, okay, this is not spirit, right? And they have to do it for everything before they can come to a conclusion that, this is spirit and not matter, like that. And so they will be using their intellect a lot in that process. The other class of men work in Krishna consciousness, that is explained in the 61st verse of the second chapter. Right? The Lord has explained also in the 39th verse, and which we did just now, that by working by the principles of Buddhi Yoga or Krishna consciousness, one can be relieved from the bonds of action. And furthermore, there is no flaw in the process, right? So there is no flaw, right? And then the same principle is more clearly explained in the 61st verse. That is, Buddhi Yoga is to depend entirely on Supreme, or more specifically on Krishna. So this is something that has to be understood. And that's why Krishna is telling Arjuna that I've told you before. Because what Arjuna is thinking is that Buddhi Yoga means that you sit down in one corner and then you just chant Hare Krishna, right? Like that. And Sankhya Yoga is to philosophically understand. And so he's just saying, okay, the Buddhi Yoga, he asked me to do Buddhi Yoga. I will sit. Now my Buddhi has now awakened, so I will just chant. What is the need for me to fight the war, right? But Krishna is here Prabhupada is explaining that the word Buddhi Yoga can be used very loosely, right? It's Karma Yoga or it's Bhakti Yoga also, Buddhi. Buddhi Yoga basically means that you're using your Buddhi to connect. Now there are various ways in which you can use your intelligence to connect to the Lord, like that, right? So, so here saying that the same principles more clearly, Therefore, both the yogas are interdependent as religion and philosophy. And now comes the very famous sentence from Srila Prabhupada. It's saying that religion without philosophy is sentiment. So if you are not backed with some solid scriptural evidence and some solid philosophy to the religion, then it is just sentiment. I think so, my heart says so, right? Like that. Or simply fanaticism. And that is why when a person is belongs to a particular religious cult, and then they don't understand or they don't pay attention to the philosophy. I mean, every religion has got some philosophy behind it, but they don't pay attention to that philosophy, then they will end up doing kind of things which their own religion doesn't recommend them to do. Why? Because they are completely sentimental, and to a certain extent, they are also fanatic. My way or highway, this is my right way, okay? Now, so he says, religion without philosophy is just fanatism or sentiment. Philosophy without religion is mental speculation. All that you're doing is that you're raking your brains, coming up with this and that, and then you are not actually, doing anything at all over there, right? So we have to understand that. So there are two paths that will go there, right? The ultimate goal is Krishna, because philosophers who are also sincere in searching after absolute truth come in the end to Krishna consciousness. That is also stated in Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, Bahunam janmanam ante jnanvan mam prapadyate. Vasudeva sarvam iti samahatma sudurlabha. It is Bahunam janmanam ante. After many, many births, as you know, the story of Narad and the cobbler. He said it will take you at least 10 births. And here he's not saying Bahunam janmanam ante. After many, many births, Jnanavan mam prapadyate. So all those who are following this path of Sankhya Yoga, the Jnanis, that's what the Jnanis do, philosophical speculation. So at the end of many, many births, these Jnanavans, they are going to come and surrender to me. Vasudeva sarvam iti. To understand that Vasudeva or Lord Krishna is everything. He's everything. Vasudeva sarvam iti sa mahatma sudurlabha. That kind of a Mahatma is very difficult to find. So you take that path, it's a difficult path. It is an indirect path. Indirect in the sense that first you'll go in one direction, and then after many, many births, you will surrender and then take the path of Bhakti Yoga. So just take the direct path, right? So, so a pure devotional service or karma in Krishna consciousness. So I also wanted to point out over here that there are two chapters in Bhagavad Gita which have got to do with Krishna, have got to do with karma. And I'm just going to bring the table of contents of Bhagavad Gita here for you so that you know which are the two chapters which have got to do with karma yoga. Can you take out your notepad and tell me real quickly? And somebody's saying that I need to share my screen. I'm sorry if I didn't do that. But I was, yeah, okay. I was not pointing to anything. I was just speaking from memory. So didn't use much. Yeah. Can you see it now? So which chapters talk about Karma Yoga? Give me just the numbers on your pads. All right, 3, 5, 3 and 5, right? So there is Karma Yoga and then there is Karma Yoga. And how does Krishna translate them? How does Prabhupada translate them? The 5th chapter 5, he's talking about Karma Yoga, action in Krishna consciousness, right? So you can act, you can do Karma Yoga, but doing Karma Yoga, doing actions for Krishna. And we were talking yesterday also about this, right? Doing some work, but then that work has to be connected to Krishna. And that takes you to a higher level of action in Krishna Yoga. And if you're doing this, then this is Bhakti Yoga. Although you're working, right? But because you're working for Krishna, that is Buddhi Yoga. And so that is what in this verse that we're looking at, Krishna is telling him that I have told you that there are two paths. Right? So between the two paths that we have Sankhya Yoga, you're raking your brains to use that, to understand what is this, neti, not this, not this, not this, till you come to a level where you say, okay, there's a soul. Now, not necessarily that Sankhya Yoga, some of the Sankhya yogis actually just stop. And towards that end, actually, there are many, many Sankhya yogis that are there in this world right now. There are many Sankhya yogis. You go to the material science department of any universities, it is full of Sankhya yogis. They have to look and they have to analyze the atoms, the molecules, the properties, and so on and so forth, right? So that's a lower level of Sankhya Yoga. And they're just connected to the material energy, but not necessarily, talking about the spirit at all. But the proper Sankhya Yoga will go to the next level and talk about that there is a soul also. So that's what in chapter number 2 of Bhagavad Gita, what Krishna is explaining is the proper Sankhya Yoga, because he's telling about spirit. He brings in that element, right? Otherwise, people will just talk about the 5 Panchabhutas and then mind, intelligence, false ego, the senses, sense objects, sense organs like that. They'll come up and then stop there. But you have to add one more element there, and that is the soul, and talk about that, right? So when people are doing Jnana Yoga, right? So in the beginning, they might just go halfway, but then, to complete it, they have to go to, they will typically go till the soul and then just stop over there. Now, the Gyan yogis, we have to understand, because the Gyan yogis are dependent. They are raking their mental energies, they're raking their brains, they're using their mental prowess to understand what this is. There is no concept of God there, right? And they are analyzing the matter, and maybe they will also, they know something about, there should be something beyond matter also. So they're pursuing that. So they are actually dependent on their own skills or their own power, or they believe in their own personal endeavor that, all right, fine, I'm doing this, I'm reading this, and if I research this more, and if I do 16 more experiments, I will come to some kind of a conclusion. So that's what they're saying, right? But in Buddhi Yoga, so they are using their intelligence, but the right intelligence is when a person, becomes a devotee and is pursuing the Buddhi Yoga path, right? And there he is completely dependent on the Lord. And we see so many stories in Krishna Leelas, Krishna's pastimes, how his Gopal, right? His friends, the cowherd boy would just go and do everything and anything, didn't matter whether this is Aghasura, whether this is a demon, or whether it's a mountain cave. They just walk inside and say, Krishna will take care. So they depend a lot on Krishna. They depend a lot, and they depend on everything for Krishna. So we have to understand that, he's saying, I told you about two, right? Dvivida Nishtha, right? There are. Now, if we continue along this path of Jnana Yoga, then we will not reach the ultimate. So Jnana Yoga and Karma Yoga, they are nothing but a gradual progress towards ultimate goal, which is devotional service, which means to attain the pure love of God, Prema Pamartha Mahan. But these are at, they're lower rungs. So Sankhya Yoga is at a lower rung than Karma Yoga. So you have to understand that. And if you just stay there, then you will just stay on that rung. If you don't bring in the element of Krishna in your life somehow or the other, maybe by the mercy of some devotee like Prabhupada, somebody gives you a book like that, then you will continue, you'll just stand on the rung of that ladder. Others will, bypass you and go down like that. So we have to remember, right? And then on the other hand, for those who are pursuing devotional service, in that verse that we read in Bhagavad Gita 2.40, Krishna is actually giving you the guarantee. He says, Neha Vikramo Nashosti, Pattavayona, Sualpam Apitra, Sualpam, even if you do a very small amount of devotional service, it's not going to go waste. So there's such a big contrast there. It's a guarantee. You're doing this, your sinful tendencies will get reduced, and you will progress more and more and more in the devotional service, right? And then to do the Gyan Yoga, there is actually, your senses, you have to purify the senses. Senses have to be purified, to be able to understand the spirit, the senses have to be purified above from the level of material engagement that our senses do. So they have to go to a higher level. And so that purification of the senses, they will do constantly by doing philosophical endeavors. They will read philosophy, they will read stories, they will read, analyze, and so on and so forth. So that, and maybe, do some austerities. In that process, they will reach, right? Whereas devotional service, the beauty of devotional service is that devotional service itself purifies you. So you don't have to do anything other than that. You just have to continue to do your devotional service, and it will cleanse you and cleanse you of your sins, and not only the sins, but also your proclivity, your tendency to go and do to perform sinful activities over there, right? So let's go back to our verse here. Screen share. So it's also stated in the Bhagavad Gita, the whole process is to understand the real position of the self in relationship to the super self, to understand Sambandha Gyan, what is my relationship with God. Gyanis might just stop at the level of finding the soul, and that's it. The indirect process is philosophical speculation, by which gradually one may come to the point of Krishna consciousness, and the other process is directly connecting everything with Krishna and Krishna consciousness. Of these two, the path of Krishna consciousness is better because it does not depend on the purifying the senses by a philosophical process. Krishna consciousness is itself the purifying process, and by the direct method of devotional service, it is simultaneously easy and sublime, right? So what he's asking, whether I should work or whether I should not work, whether I should fight or not fight. I don't think I should fight, because Buddhi Yoga is using your Buddhi and doing devotional service. But then now slowly Krishna is telling him that actually there are two classes of men, right? One are the Jnanis, who try to realize, and then the others are the bhaktas or the buddhi yogis. And then how a buddhi yogi is, what actually is the right buddhi yoga, he's going to talk about that in subsequent words, right? And he's also going to tell you whether not working, and which is what Arjuna is inclined towards. In the next verse, he'll talk about, what happens that, if you just decide that I'm not going to work. So we have to remember that renunciation, right? Renunciation should not be premature. Premature renunciation is dangerous and it's difficult for us to do, right? And it is useless because you'll come back, right? So just renouncing something, and this is something that we always say a lot, and it is a very interesting thing which happens to all of us, and that is that sometimes people might say that, okay, I'm just going to renounce everything, and because I have renounced everything, that I have become pure. And Prabhupada always says that, if you just go and sit on the top of the Himalayas, that doesn't mean that you have purified, right? Actual purification comes, renunciation actually is a result of the purification that happens. Once you're purified, then you'll automatically renounce, because now you know, right, which one is the better one. So same thing happened with Dhruva, right? He was going after the material, and then the ultimate purification happened when Krishna Garbha comes and touches his head, right, which is conch shell, and then he's completely purified, and then he looks at him and says, I don't want anything, right? Renounced everything, the very same thing for which he was doing tapasya for 6 difficult months. Why? Because he was purified. So we have to remember that renunciation is actually a process, is a result of purification. And how do I get purified? I get purified by doing work. And so sometimes when we are handling projects in our temple, you're handling so many devotees, and devotees will have their own minds, right? And then own difference of opinions, right? Or may have a different behavior towards you, right? And so our purification happens while doing that. So one might just think like, what am I doing? Why do I get with all this? Let's stop going to the temple itself. Stop volunteering for anything. Let me just sit and chant, right? After all, Kalau nastyeva, 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 gatiranyata. That's what I'm going to do, right? But, you can do that. You can do that also, because the name itself is purifying. So if you sit and chant, it'll have its effect, but it's going to take a long time. So it's better to, do something in addition to do the purification. That's why they say you should also do archana, which is, you should do deity worship. The deity worship purifies us. Similarly, when we take up these voluntary activities and we have to handle so many people, and then we control ourselves, right? We learn how to control because we are managing something, or not even managing. When we're doing any service, we are working for somebody else, other than apparently Krishna, then we have to control our senses as well. And once you learn how to do that, then the purification happens, right? And once all that purification will happen, then when you're very, very purified, then you will be renounced. But the beauty of that is that you won't renounce and say, okay, now I can give up the volunteer work. You will renounce yourself from the results of that, results of doing the volunteer activity. Sometimes the results are bitter, right? And some people are not coming on time, people are not misbehaving, people are not listening to you, people are, whatever they can do, right? You will just look at it in a very objective manner. And because you are at a higher and a more purified state at that time. So saying that I'm not going to work is actually not the right approach. And this is what Bhagavad Gita is about. So when people say that, when they say that, what is the Bhagavad Gita about? And normally if you ask anybody, some of the people who just generally read the Bhagavad Gita, it's about the duty, right? It's about the duty. So if I'm a man and I'm working hard and I'm taking care of my family, I've done my duty. It's not that. Bhagavad Gita is about doing work, no doubt about it. But there's a line which Arjuna is missing right now, and that is, you have to work for Krishna. You don't have to work for yourself, right? Because if you're working for yourself, then that's fine. I don't want to fight the war because I'm working for my spoils of the war. I don't care about whether I win or not. I'm going to sit on the back of the chariot and I won't fight, right? But Krishna is saying, no, you have to do that. You have to work. And we'll see more of that coming in the chapters, coming in the verses that come up further down this chapter. Okay. So I will stop this over here and open it up for a few minutes of reflections or questions or anything like that that you have, that you want to talk about. And let me also give you the powers to unmute yourself. And you can always raise your hand also. And where are the participants? Okay. I'm going to allow yourself to unmute yourself. Okay. All right. Anything that you heard? Anything? Any quick questions that you have? We can definitely take all these up. Have I unmuted? Okay, Simi Mataji has raised her hand. And let's see what Simi Mataji is going to say. And you can unmute yourself, Simi Mataji.
Yeah, I did.
You did? Okay.
Pranam, Mataji, Hare Krishna. Mataji, what is Krishna consciousness called in Hindi? How do you say that in Hindi?
Oh, Varshana Mataji is smiling. Okay, Varshana Mataji, go ahead. Belt it out.
Krishna Bhavnamrit.
Bhavnamrit.
Bhavna?
Mrit.
Mrit.
Bhavnamrit.
Mrit. Bhavna ka amrit.
Bhavnamrit.
The nectar.
Thank you, Mataji.
You're welcome. Yeah. Anything else? Chapter 3, 4, 5 are heavy chapters. Varshana, okay, go ahead, Mataji.
Yes, yes, Mataji. In the translation, it is said that some are inclined to understand it by empirical philosophical speculation and others by devotional service. But yeah, I understand that you had given the example of a staircase and going by the elevator. You see, so devotional service is going by the elevator and empirical philosophical speculation is going by steps. So, but at the same time, I feel that in empirical and philosophical speculation, we can get deviated on the way. Will that be correct, Mataji?
Yes. We have examples of people being deviated. Vishwamitra. Yes.
But Mataji, most of the time we want to use our head. You see, Gyan Yoga and you see Gyan Yoga.
Yes, but then, you know, that's a very good point that you bring up. And we have to understand this part. We have to understand this thing very clearly. And that is the Gyanis are doing things independent of God. They're just trying to find out that this is matter. And so these are these capabilities of matter and properties of matter. And is there something like antimatter? That's what they're doing, right? Spirit is antimatter. So they are using their brain. That's why they say that they're using their own brain. They're speculating. That speculation means I'm using my brains. And you remember that we have got 4 defects. Material senses have got 4 defects. So whatever they're going to do is going to be defective. And that's why they say that if you want to get knowledge, knowledge has to come from a source, higher source, right? And which is, it has to come from a source which is beyond these 4 defects of material. So it has to come from Krishna. So Gyanis will break their brains and ultimately they will come to the soul, that there is a soul. They can, and that's it, they stop. There is no devotional service, no nothing like that. And that's why I'm saying that only Bahunam Janmanam Ante Gyanvam Man Prapadyate. So he's saying after many, many births, they will do that. Vasudeva Sarvam Iti Sa Mahatma Sudurlabha. So he's saying that Vasudeva is everything. Such Mahatmas are very Sudurlabha, very difficult, very rare to find. Why? Because once you are all full of your brain, then it requires somebody of the caliber of Srila Prabhupada to come and, you know, give you the mercy so that you will turn and then go to the next rung in the ladder. Right? On the other hand, the devotee starts from humility, the level of humility. And so the devotee also tries to get knowledge, but the type of knowledge, why do you want to know about Krishna? Because you already a devotee, you already have that relationship, you know, little bit, you know that there is a Krishna, there is a God, I have to go to him. And now you're trying to find how to go to him. And in order to find how to go to him, you are getting some knowledge. So you see, the reason is very different. Why? So it's not that we should not get knowledge. We should get knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
that's
should
what
get
I want.
knowledge. Yes, but then the reasoning, intention behind getting that knowledge. You
To
see,
get onto the devotional service.
yes, is to strengthen and augment the devotional services that we are doing, the practice we are doing, right? To understand, to clear the doubts that you will have as you are pursuing devotional service, right? And to hasten the process, you will do all these kind of things. Now, here's the interesting thing, that the jnani, and so you will do, the jnani is focused completely on acquiring knowledge. Acquiring knowledge is what they want, right? Knowledge is this or is it not, right? That is knowledge. And then on the other hand, the devotee wants to do devotional service to the Lord. And here's the interesting thing, that knowledge comes as a concomitant factor. When you do devotional service, knowledge will automatically come, even if you don't pursue it. Knowledge, how does it come? Mahat sevam dwaram ahu mukte. Rishabdev tells his sons that Mahat sevam, when you do seva to the Mahats, when you do seva to the great souls, to the Mahatmas, then that will open the doors to vimukti, to liberation for you, right? And example of that, one who served, one who was completely stupid and did not know anything, Narad Muni, son of a maid servant, right? And then all that he did was he did the seva for the Mahats. Then he got knowledge, right? So there are various ways in which we can, gain the knowledge, but the best, that's why we say, go to the temple, serve, go to the temple, chop, go to the temple, mop, go to the temple, shop, like that. So action, there is activity. Activity has to be done. Just sitting back and relaxing and saying that, I'm a devotee, I'm away from this matter, what do I have to do? No. That's not going to work. And we see that, right? The opening statement of Arjuna is that, if you say Buddhi Yoga is better, if you say devotional service is better, why are you asking me to fight this war? Which means I don't want to work. You have told me enough. Yes, you have told me this and that, and yeah, I'm the soul and they are the soul, and fine, everything is fine. So devotional service means working. It means working. That's what, you see how much devotees work, right? Like that. They work a lot.
Thank you, Madam.
You're welcome. Okay, it's past 8 o'clock. I have to prep for other meetings that are lined up this night for me. So I'll take a leave. If there's anything that is left, we will definitely cover it in our next session, which will be on Thursday. Okay.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Danda Pranam.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Danda Pranam.
Patitanam Pavnibhyo. Gaur Premanande.
Manande, Hari, Hari,
Hare Krishna
Thank you,
Mataji.
Mataji.
Hare Krishna so much,
Thank you.
Mataji.